What's up, cooks? Welcome to the Card Kitchen. I am the Card Chef, and today we are cooking up a handful of cards that I believe will instantly get buffed the moment the new set Celestial Guardians comes into existence and releases on, I believe it's May 30th, and when it does, all these cards will instantly become very much more playable than they have been previously. So first off, we're going to start with Aerodactyl, Red Card, and Mars, and I think we're going to talk about all three of them at the same time because they're all going to do or help a deck that you're playing to do one very specific thing, and that is stopping the consistency of the new card Rare Candy. Because Rare Candy is going to be released and allow your opponent or your opponents that you're playing to be able to evolve quicker into stage 2, you are going to want to stifle that by playing things like Red Card and Mars to mess up their hands, and Aerodactyl. So I believe Aerodactyl will start to come back into the meta in Fighting Toolbox cards. Or Fighting Toolbox decks, sorry. So decks with like Lucario, Rampardos. In fact, Aerodactyl and Rampardos can work very well together, especially in a deck that wants to play a lot of fossils and potentially something like Chatot. So I made a deck a while ago. I called it Fossil Turbo, where you played one Chatot, 2 Aerodactyl lines, and 2 Rampardos lines. And basically what you were able to do is get through your deck as quickly as possible by emptying your hand by putting down fossils and tool cards, and then going through your deck with Chatot because your opponent's hand size might be very large. Now, I'm not saying that deck specifically, but just in general, being able to play Aerodactyl and potentially Rampardos together in a deck with something like Lucario, and then have some things like Marshadow, Hitmonlee, or potentially Sudowoodo in the deck might help that deck in the future to become better than it already is, considering there's going to be so many people trying to evolve stage 2s as early as possible, which means we're going to probably see a lot more of evolution decks, and these 3 cards can absolutely do that or help you to stop them from doing that. Of course, Aerodactyl, as you know, has Primeval Law, which if it's in, it stops your opponent's active Pokemon from being able to evolve. So no, it doesn't stop the back row from being able to evolve, but you can also play Mars and Red Card in your decks to stop them from being able to evolve at all, regardless of where it's at. So Mars is already used a ton right now in the meta, at least at 1 in almost every single deck, because there is so much Meowscarada, Beedrill, Magnezone, Charizard, Blastoise, Gallade, all these stage 2 decks. Now those decks might be able to get into those quicker, which means we might just start playing more copies of Mars. We have seen a lot of versions of Darkrai Giratina playing 2 copies of Mars already to make sure we can stop those bad matchups into the Beedrill and Meowscarada decks that hit Darkrai for weakness. So those Darkrai Giratina decks might actually just get better, considering they're definitely going to be playing 2 Mars now, and they might even find a way to fit in 1 or 2 copies of red just to ensure that they stop those red cards from going off as early as possible. Now, with that being said, let's get into the next couple of cards. So the next couple of cards, I want to highlight 3 colorless Pokemon that might get a buff coming into Celestial Guardians because of the new card Ilima. What Ilima does, it's a supporter card that says put 1 colorless Pokemon that has damage on it into your hand. So this is going to work very well, specifically with Arceus and Kangaskhan and potentially Regigigas. So the reason why we believe Arceus might be a good card to play alongside this is you can start playing Arceus Link decks without Arceus EX and replace it with a different EX Pokemon, and then just use Arceus as a tank. It has 120 HP, and so therefore it could just sit in the front, tank, and then you can bounce it back with Ilima and then put it right back down onto the bench so that your link abilities still are in effect, specifically with something like Crobat. The Darkrai Giratina can already plays with Greninja, but potentially can now be played with Crobat and just play the colorless or the baby version of Arceus so that we can get the Crobat effect online. So now when you're attaching to your Darkrai instead of your Arceus EX and then ramp ramp in with your Giratina, you can evolve into your Crobat and then bounce back the Arceus after it's taken enough damage, bring in your Darkrai, and then start doing 30 extra damage. This would also allow us to remove things potentially like Rocky Helmet and Red from the Darkrai Giratina deck, so that we only rely on Crobat, because now we can get 30 extra damage to the active Pokemon, which may just be enough. With Darkrai, of course, it already does 80 damage base. Over the course of 3 turns of manual energy, that's 60 damage, 20 each time you attach a dark energy to Darkrai. That's 140 total. And then with the Crobat, it's 170. And then, of course, if your opponent healed or retreated and you bring in that Darkrai into the active, basically what you're going to do is you're going to do 100 damage with Darkrai because you put an energy on it and then attack, and then with the Crobat it's 130, so it's still pretty decent. And then of course Crobat with Giratina will do 160 damage, which might be pretty decent as well. But anyways, now we're going to talk about Kangaskhan, and why I think Kangaskhan is so good is for 2 reasons. One, it works as a tank just like Arceus maybe, as well as being able to attack early on for aggressive damage early on in the game. It only requires 1 energy for Dizzy Punch, which either does 30 for 1 heads or 60 for 2 heads or 0 for no heads at all. But if you can get those heads, you're just getting free damage early on in the game, and then you can focus the rest of your energy on something else. And then if it was able to take enough damage without being knocked out, you can actually deny your opponent a prize card altogether by just bouncing it back with Elima, and you don't really lose that much because you're only losing 1 energy. So it might be pretty good to play Kangaskhan in the future going forward. You can also put a Rocky Helmet on it to get additional passive damage as well, or avoid your opponent from attacking into you altogether, which means you're almost never going to get knocked out because then they're just not attacking into you at all. And because it has a 3 retreat cost, now you don't have to rely on a leaf. What you can do is you can just play Elima, bounce it back, and then bring your other Pokemon in and either hold Kangaskhan in your hand or put it back down on the bench. And if you do hold it in your hand, now it won't be Sabrina'd out to get that extra prize that your opponent might be able to get in the future. And then we have Regigigas. So I'm not so sure on this, but it is pretty interesting because Regigigas has the ability to, or the effect of its attack to do 50 plus the amount of damage that Regigigas has on it, I believe. Or is it has on it, or has this attack does more damage equal to the damage this Pokemon has on it. Yes, so exactly. So if it has 140 HP with a cape 160, say it gets down to like 30 HP or something crazy like that because it was attacked by a Giratina or whatever it may be, well, now it's going to do 180 damage. So now if it's not knocked out on the following turn, either one, you can attack again, or if you're afraid you're going to lose it, you can actually just bounce it back to your hand and then bring something else in. Now, I'm not saying it's going to work absolutely great. It's just one of those cards I think you should look out for because you do want it to have damage on it in order to its attack, and then because it has so much damage on it at some point that you might not want it on the board anymore, you can actually bounce it back. It might also be counteractive, so maybe it's not the greatest, but I do think it's one that needs to be looked out for and tested with Elima to see if it's worth playing. With that being said, let's get into the next couple of cards. So these are the next couple of cards, and they all revolve around water Pokemon, specifically Blastoise and Amistar, and the reasons I'm highlighting them is because of specifically Rare Candy and the broken combination that it can have with Misty, because Misty not only ramps your energy onto your Pokemon, but Rare Candy ramps your evolution line into the stage 2. And because a Rare Candy is an item card and Misty is a supporter card, they can both be played on the same turn, which not only means you can evolve right away into your Blastoise, but you can also ramp all of its energy the same turn as well, because in reality you can manually attach one and then get 2 Misty flips, which means you have 3 energy, and even if you get 1, you now have 180 body on the field in the active spot doing 40 damage. The next turn you're doing 100, and then so on and so forth. The more energy you put on it, you eventually start to do 160 per turn. So having Misty and Rare Candy in a water deck that has obviously a stage 2 can potentially be very broken. The same thing goes for Amistar. Now Amistar is a little bit different and will be a little bit harder to do because it's a fossil Pokemon. And yes, Rare Candy will work with fossils 100%, in case you were wondering, which means you won't be able to start in the active with your fossil. But if you find a way to get your active Pokemon out of the active spot and bring in the Amistar that you were candied and Mistied the same turn, you can lock your opponent out from being able to attack almost instantly. So these two cards, specifically from the older cards that we currently have, will definitely get a buff because of Rare Candy and its combination with Misty. Not to mention the Primarina, the water starter from Alola that we'll be getting. If that card is actually very good, it might be a broken combo with that as well. But anyways, let's get into the next couple of cards. So the next couple of cards we want to talk about are 3 very specific Stage 2. Now I've already done a full-fledged video on a whole bunch of Stage 2 Pokemon that I think will benefit very much from the new Rare Candy coming out in Celestial Guardian. So go check out that video if you feel like it. But as for these 3, I want to put a more of a spotlight on them because I think 2 will absolutely become meta. 1 is already a meta card, and I think it will probably be one of, if not the best deck in the game going forward, and that's Meowscarada. We'll get into that in a moment. And then 1 is Victory Bell, which I don't know if it will become meta, but I definitely think it finally gets its time to shine now that we have Rare Candy. But the first one we're going to talk about is Charizard EX. It's the new Stoke Charizard that just came out in the previous set. It has 150 damage for 5 energy, but more importantly, its first attack for 1 energy is Stoke, which allows you to attach 3 energy from your discard pile, 5 energy that is. So basically what you can do is the turn you put your, you can put 1 energy on your Charmander and then evolve it with with Rare Candy as soon as possible, and then use Stoke. So now you get up to a minimum of 4 energy. If you already have 2 energy on it, then you're already at 5. But even if you already have 4, your turn ends, and then by the following turn you have that 5th ready to go. And this Charizard for 150 damage does not have to discard any cards or any energy, my bad, at all to do its attack, which means you're doing 150 damage consistently every single turn. You combine that with things like Rocky Helmet and Red, this deck is actually going to be very strong. In fact, I have a couple of ideas for some Stage 2 decks, which I'm not sure are going to be absolutely fantastic, but I have an idea in my head for 17 trainer Stage 2 decks where you play 1 copy of the basic Pokemon and 2 copies of the Stage 2, and then just like those 18 trainer card decks, you hope to get that Misty. In this case, you hope to get that Rare Candy, and of course the Stage 2, so that you can evolve it very quickly. And I think Charizard would absolutely benefit in that way. Now it's a super duper risk. I'm sure there's going to be way better consistent decks, but that is a really cool idea. And 17 trainer Stage 2 decks might actually become a thing. And I think I'm actually going to do a full-on video about 17 trainer Stage 2 decks. But then more importantly, Meowscarada. I think Meowscarada by far will absolutely become the best deck in the format going forward because of Rare Candy. The fact that you can play a Meowscarada and a Rare Candy in the same turn, and it only requires 2 energy to attack, which means if you already have 1 energy on it and then you get to attach another and evolve in the same turn, this guy will start attacking instantly into those big EX Pokemon that it wants to attack into. And by doing that, not only that, but because you start with this Sprigatito in your active more often than not, what you're going to be able to do is if you play no Florigato at all, I'm not saying you shouldn't, maybe 1, but even if you play 0, that means if you're playing just Sprigatito, and this is why I'm saying 17 trainer decks might become a thing, if you play Sprigatito, 2 or 1 Sprigatito and 2 Meowscarada, you will automatically search your Meowscarada, which means if you already have a Rare Candy in your hand, then by the next turn, you will always get your Meowscarada online because you already attached 1 to search it with attach 1 energy to search it with your Sprigatito, and then the next turn you're able to evolve it with Rare Candy because it searched it right away, and then you're able to put your second energy on it, which means you're attacking for 130 damage into any EX Pokemon that might be in the active. But again, this is also being played alongside things like Beedrill, who I also believe, and I didn't put it on this list, but I do believe is probably the second or third best Stage 2 deck from cards that we already have that will benefit the most from Rare Candy, because again, it will be able to evolve very quickly, and it only requires 2 energy, and then if you get it evolved faster than you usually do, that means you're already discarding energies from your opponent's Pokemon at will, which means you've just completely controlled the pace of the game and controlled the entire game state, which means you're absolutely going to win the game. And then we have Victory Bell. So Victory Bell, again, on the fence. I'm not so sure exactly how it will do, but I do think it will finally have its time to shine, especially with Solgaleo, Solagios. I don't remember how to say his name. I always get it wrong, and I don't care. But with that card, you can create a really cool combo where when you have Victory Bell in the front, you can bring out a basic Pokemon and then use Solgaleo to bring itself into the active and then knock out whatever Pokemon he brought in. Then on the following turn, you can leaf the Solgaleo out of the active, bring Victory Bell back in, bring out another card or another basic from your opponent's side of the board, and then bring Solgaleo back in again, and then knock out that Pokemon, which means you now either have 2 or 3 prizes and you've just won the game. So I do think, and then not only that, you can also just play Victory Bell by itself or with another Pokemon, another grass Pokemon, so you can play Grass Energy, which means once you bring out a basic Pokemon, if it's not an EX, it's something that evolves into something else, like a Sprigatito, a Magnemite, or whatever it may be, something like a Ralts. You can bring it out early, even a Charmander, and bring it out early and then knock it out because it does 60 damage, which means you're basically knocking out any basic Pokemon that evolves into something else. So that's really, really good. This also will work very well in the same way, kind of, with the Pidgeot from Genetic Apex as well. Now, you can't choose the Pokemon that you bring out, but it's basically in every single turn Sabrina. So in the decks that you're going to be playing Pidgeot, you're just not going to be playing Sabrina at all. You might still play a Cyrus, but you know what? If you're already playing Pidgeot and you can do it every single turn, there might be a chance that you can just create a ton of like tumbleweed effect where like you're just constantly putting damage on new Pokemon, so you get to a point where no matter which one you bring out, you're always going to end up knocking something out. But anyways, that is it for this video. I hope you liked it. Let me know what cards that I may have missed that you think get an instant buff once this new set releases. As I said, you don't have to mention any stage 2s because I've already done an entire video on stage 2, so go check it out there. But if there is any other cards that I didn't mention that aren't stage 2s, let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and share. Join my Discord and my Twitter, and as always, keep cooking.